So you want to beat every boss in the released version of Exedra using only 4-star on Nightmare difficulty, meaning every single boss all the way up to and including Needle Witch Nightmare. Yeah, just with 4-star, easy. Not actually that difficult. I'm going to show you all how to do it in this one. So first off, I'm going to go through some basic ideas that basically give you all of the information you already need. But then I'm also going to go through all of the individual bosses to show you if there are some specific strategies and ideas you might want to follow. But generally, with just these basic tips I'm going to give you, that should already be, hopefully, a lot of help to get you through this. So starting out, what do we actually want to do with our team? Well, we're going to do the usual team of one attacker, one breaker, a Hazuki, a buffer or debuffer, and then a sustain. There's going to be some changes with this specific setup for some of the bosses, but that's just the general team setup we're doing. So we're going to ask ourselves the question, which 4-star characters are actually good? And the answer is basically all of them. So you're basically going to use every single one of your 4-star for this challenge. I don't think there's a single 4-star that is not usable on like at least one of these stages. And in fact, I think in the I went through and I made a video of me doing every single boss, and I think I actually just happened to use every single one of these characters on at least one boss. I didn't try to do that, but that's just sort of what happened, I guess. But here are some standouts. First off, Hazuki. Hazuki is easily the best 4-star character in the game, and is better than a lot of 5-star characters even. So this character is going to be absolutely everywhere, which is also why I gave her a really high magic level. I maxed out her special. I gave her 3 Crystallis. You don't have to do that. But the thing is, since she's going to be on every single team you're ever going to do, and even when they release more 4-star characters in the future, she's going to be on every single 4-star team ever, so you might as well put as much resources into her as you can. But like I said, you don't need to. And the reason for that is that she's a buffer, and buffers don't scale that well with more investment. Like the Crystallis here, they're fine. I've given just a little bit of MP, the 2 guards here for some damage reduction, which is fine, which is going to be great, but it's going to help a lot, but not something you have to do. But just as a pointer, Hazuki is going to be your pillar, your center is going to be there every single fight, so you're going to have to focus on her. Next up, what other characters are there? Well, apart from that, for the most part, just pick whatever character you think fits the current boss, either with trying to counter that boss's gimmick or just being off the correct element. For example, you have a choice of attacker. For example, you have, for example, your Nanaka right here, who is going to be for forest. Then you have water, has Asuka right here. Then for Void, you have Masara right here. And then technically also Dark has Kush, but because Kush is very much AoE focused, and there's not many bosses that are Dark weak where also AoE is very important, she's kind of the odd one out. But you can still make use of her on some of the bosses. So like I said, all of them are kind of useful, but you want to specifically make sure that if possible, won't always be possible, but if possible, get one of the correct element. I can tell you, for example, that Nanaka will be used multiple times, Masada will be used on some of the harder bosses, but there will be some cases, specifically later we'll see, some bosses where they are weak to basically only Dark, and they're single target focused, so we're not going to be able to use Kush, meaning there are some bosses where we're not going to be using an attacker, but you kind of have to invest into all of them. And when I say invest, what do I mean? Maximum level. This goes, by the way, for every single character that you have, is they should always be at the maximum possible level of your account. My account is level 118, so they're all gonna be 118. You're not gonna try and tell me that you're not gonna do that or anything like that. You're gonna do this every single time, okay? No questions asked. With magic level, you're going to go all the way up to 110 or 111, usually 111 because that's where the last upgrade to the skill happens, and skill upgrades are very important. Other than that, not really, like nothing above that is really that important, but specifically the last skill upgrade is very important. So maximum level, magic level around 110, 111 is going to be for every single character. As far as the special is concerned, at least level 4, but at best level 7 out of 10 for every single character. You can go higher if you really want to. But specifically, going higher is only for attackers, because attackers might need that extra damage from this, or characters that scale really well with their special. Like you have characters that, for example, give a damage buff to the team, like Kazuki, I think, and by increasing the special level, that damage buff goes higher. So that might be a character where it might make sense. Or your breakers, because breakers, they also go and do more break gauge reduction the higher their special level is. So also with breakers, you want to, if possible, get their special attack really high, but you don't have to go all the way to 10. At least 7 is like the minimum of what you should be doing, in my opinion, with your special level. Then what else do we have? Well, we have the Crystallis. Now I went and I said I'm going to dedicate only a single day of farming. I'm going to spend like 8 QP orbs, QP cubes on this. And just with those 8 QP cubes, I basically went and gave every single one of my characters a Crystallis by just rotating through them. So I put like 3 of them in together with like 2 characters that I know can beat the stage by themselves. And they just rotated them around and I just looked at what I was getting. And I basically moved on as soon as I got a single good Crystallis. So you see, for example, I needed a bit more on Kush, and I gave her just anything that increased damage, like Elemental Weakness. But I've given other characters something like, okay, Speed, sure, why not? A Guard, sure, you can put as many guards on all of your characters as you want, either Indomitable Guard or Focused Guard. Either of them are fine, either of the 2 Guard are perfectly fine. Speed is always fine, MP is good, whatever. 15% attack, yeah, on an attacker, you're gonna put 15% attack if possible. But other damage increasing Crystallis, like the elemental damage increase or weakness damage increase, also perfectly fine. More Guard. I think, yeah, for example, she rolled a Guard and I immediately went, yeah, good enough, put Guard on her and next character. It's really that simple. More guards on my characters. Guards are gonna go a long way. Right here also, I just rolled a guard after a while and said, yeah, you know what, guard, good enough, moving on. And for substats HP, don't forget substat HP, because HP is gonna go a really long way. But yeah, moving on, you see a lot more characters that just rolled a guard and then I moved on. And it's basically gonna be like this for every single character, where I just went, okay, I'm just gonna get one Crystallis that's okay, that's decent, that gives me something either for the team, like a Guard Memoria, a Guard Crystallis, or a damage increasing Crystallis, or a speed, and then I just went on to the next character. And the reason I want to stress this is because I want to make sure that you understand that yes, you can farm more Crystallis, that you can put multiple Crystallis on your characters to make it a lot easier, but you don't have to. You can just make sure that they have just some Crystallis that's good for them, and that's already good enough. But I do want to stress, they should have at least a Crystallis. Like, give them something. And not just for the main stat right here, for this damage increase, for example, but also for the HP, for speed that they can get on their secondary stats right here. A lot of my characters, they have HP on the stats right here, or they have speed, or both if possible, because that's going to go a really long way. Because now that I mentioned all of this stuff about the level, about the magic level, about the Crystallis, about the special level or whatever, most of that is to increase the stats that your character has, right? You look at your HP, you look at your attack, your defense, your speed. You want these stats to be as high as possible. Which also is with your support Kyoku. Your support Kyoku are all gonna be 5-star Kyoku, mainly for the stats. Get your stats as high as possible. Your stats are going to carry you. There will be some really hard bosses later. Like, we're gonna do 4-star only on stuff like Walpurgisnacht, for example. And you're gonna see Walpurgisnacht do like no damage to my team whatsoever. And it's gonna be entirely trivial to survive against Walpurgisnacht. You're gonna be wondering, how is that possible? Because I have really high stats. Like, I have high HP, I have high defense. And with both high HP and high defense and the Guard Crystallis on top of that, I just have so much damage reduction and so much HP that the boss can't even touch me. And this is what I want to hammer home, because you don't need to watch the rest of this video where I go through every single boss. If you just take this with you, that yes, just getting high stats alone will get you through almost every single boss in here. And the second part of that is to just get characters of the correct element, like your attacker right here. But if you move on to other roles as well, yeah, for your breakers, once again, you want to match the elements if possible. So of course for fire we have Karanat here, for water we have forest, we have, what else do we have? We have void. These are the elements that we have breakers for. We don't have breakers for all elements, okay? That's also something I need to mention. There is a boss later on where we don't have a breaker of a good element that actually makes sense, that I will actually not use a breaker for. It's Needle Witch, by the way. I'm not using a breaker on Needle Witch. But these are the elements that you have breakers for. Some of them lean more into single target, some of them lean more into AoE, but for the most part, if you just get a breaker of the same element as the boss is weak to, already perfect. You're always going to have a Hazuki, it's not debatable, and then you're going to have a buffer or a debuffer. Some bosses have mechanics where you need a debuffer. Like, for example, you need a debuffer on Sandbox because you need to have buff removal. There's going to be a debuff that we need on Mermaid Witch because we need to have a ailment on Mermaid Witch and on the horse. You're going to need an ailment on the horse as well. So for this slot, you either have a buffer. Rika is perfect for this because Rika can both give single target damage increase to your attacker, but can also give bonus MP to your breaker for more breaks. And she has a speed buff on her special, which is perfect. And you might say, oh, but we don't have Muamura, we don't have A2 Mami to give us speed. We don't need that. Rika is going to give us a lot of speed, and that's already good enough, right? But you can also use Rico. Rico also gives a speed buff passively to the entire team. As far as debuffers go, for ailments you have Himika, and for buff removal you have Ayame, and you can also use Hana for ailments as well. And already we're using most of the characters. What else is left? Well, there's only really one slot left, and that is the sustain. And for sustain we are going to use, for the most part, a Kokoro, but the first half of all the bosses don't even need a sustain. So you don't really need to have a sustain for like the first half of these bosses. But still, we're going to use mainly a Kokoro, but also sometimes a Reira. And I think for one or two bosses, a Yuma, maybe even just one boss, a Yuma. Yuma used to be the most important 4-star character after Hazuki during the game's release cycle when it was really hard to get rid of ailments. But nowadays, we can get rid of ailments with just having a Rika and Hazuki pump MP into Reira. And Reira just does better healing across the party anyway, specifically because now we take less damage, and if we take less damage, Reira has an easier time healing the party, so Reira actually pulls ahead as being the more important of the two healers. Yeah, that's all the 4-star characters. Actually, we're gonna use all of them. So now that we've gone through the basics and I've explained to you that, I guess I can also go through the portraits. The portraits aren't really that dramatic, it's just the very simple portraits that you're gonna expect these kinds of roles to use. So for your attacker, of course, attack. Yeah, everyone else basically uses speed. Basically, everyone uses speed. And then your defender is going to use defense. If you use a healer, you're going to use your HP recovery. That's basically it. You could theoretically use MP recovery on like a buffer or a sustain. But the thing is, if we don't have someone like a Momura or an A2 Mami, and we only have someone like Rika giving us speed, while we're still getting a lot of speed, we really need that extra speed. We really need every single bit of speed we can get. So using MP recovery over speed oftentimes doesn't work out really well. So using speed on basically every single character instead, that's what we're going to do. And for support, like I mentioned, stats are really important. So if possible, use a 5-star character on every single one of your support slots. That is kind of really important. And then on top of that, yeah, if they have a special secondary effect that's really good, like for example, putting Tsuruno on your Hazuki, absolutely perfect. If you have one of the breaker supports that increases speed, like Toka, like Mifuyu, like Mel, like Tsukuyo, those 4 are basically the perfect supports for this because they all give a speed buff, unlike something like an Iroha that doesn't give a speed buff, which kind of falls by the wayside. But yeah, speed increases for supports on your breaker are also perfect. Now let's say you have your support set up, you have your portrait set up, you have your level and everything, and you're still struggling because you're dying too fast. You can still always go higher with magic level. You can go all the way up to 120, 130. The amount of extra stats that you get from this are pretty darn big. Now usually I wouldn't tell anyone to do this because that's a lot of resources into a 4-star character, but theoretically, magic level is a way that you can always gain more stats to help you out even more. You can go higher on your special level as well. And you can also just wait until your account is of a higher level. Like if you're level 110, for example, Just wait until 115, 117, 118, even higher, 120, and then you're gonna have so many stats the enemy can't even touch you because you just have too much defense at some point. Those are all the basics, and that's most of the video so far. I know I've talked for a long time, but for now, you basically know everything. The rest of this video is just me taking everything that I've just said and saying, and now I'm gonna fight this boss with everything that I've just said. So yeah, here go the boss fights. Okay, so the very first few bosses there's really nothing much to talk about. On these bosses, you can actually just have your attacker attack 2 or 3 times with Hazuki buffs, with Rika buffs, and I think my Nanaka actually 2-shot the first boss with just 2 attacks and then 3-shot the next 2 or 3 bosses. So there's really nothing much happening for the first few bosses. So we're gonna skip like really far ahead already, and we're gonna skip all the way to... well, the first boss that actually has a mechanic that you might want to actually worry about, which is the Dog Witch, in my opinion. So on the Dog Witch, you don't want to actually fight the minions too much, because the more you fight the minions, the stronger the boss becomes. So you want to actually make sure that you have the ability to have single targeted damage focused on the boss. Now, in my video that I have for this boss, I did have my Rika cleave onto the ad and actually kill the ad in the middle of this, but still it's not going to buff the boss too much if there's just a little bit of spillover damage. But for the most part, you want to actually focus specifically on the boss and only on the boss. There's a problem with this though. The boss is weak to fire and dark, which means that for attackers, the only attacker that we can really use here would be Kush, but Kush is AoE and would hit the ads. Now you can ignore this and just cleave onto the ads, it makes the boss a little harder. But in my opinion, you can also just not use an attacker, which may need 2 or 3 breaks to kill the boss then. But still, you could just play without an attacker and play the fight a little bit longer, and it's totally fine. It's okay, I just used another debuffer instead. But you can just put another buffer here either. The reason I used a debuffer is because I have my IMA who is fire type and therefore is of the correct element to not take bonus damage from the boss. But that's basically it. As long as you don't do too much damage to the ads, you're going to be totally fine. Now the next boss after this is going to be the Mermaid Witch. And Mermaid Witch is a boss that during release was quite difficult for a lot of people because your characters weren't level 100 yet. You might not have had the best characters yet, you might not have had high magic level yet, you might not have known about the strategy that you have to use an ailment, but we know all of that now, and our characters are really high level. In fact, the actual power level of our team is sitting at around 66,000 or something, which is way higher than 5-star only teams were during the release version. So our team is actually stronger stat-wise than release version teams of full 5 stars. On top of that, we have Crystalists, which don't even show up in the team power, so we are much more powerful than release 5-star teams, which is why a boss like this is actually not that difficult. So for this team, I used a debuffer instead of another buffer, and the reason for that is, like I said, we need a ailment on the boss, because as long as there is a damage dealing ailment on the boss does not get more speed, which is good because we don't want the boss to gain speed. But if the boss doesn't gain any speed, we just have our Hazuki pump extra turns into Karen as much as we can. And by doing that, Karen breaks the boss really, really fast. Like after just 2 or 3 turns, the boss is already broken. So this goes insanely fast. Like Hazuki is just extremely overpowered for getting your breaker to break a boss really, really fast. So yes, Hazuki plus Karen is overpowered. But it doesn't end there, because as soon as the boss is broken, then the Hazuki instead buffs the Nanaka, and then the Nanaka kills the boss in like 2 or 3 hits very easily. So you can see this boss just crumbles and can't really do anything, because yeah, the boss has an ailment on it, so it doesn't gain speed, and then it just gets broken and dies. There is another caveat though, which is the fact that the boss gives itself a damage reduction buff on like the 2nd turn. You can't break that fast, so in my kill I actually waited a little bit. So I actually went a bit slower and waited it out and waited for the damage reduction buff that the boss gives itself to fade. It's not going to be that much of a difference if you're going to wait like 2 more turns. Just wait the 2 more turns. It's fine. It's fine. So yeah, you just wait those 2 more turns and then the boss just dies right afterwards as soon as the boss gets broken. So not really much of an issue at all, simply because of the power of having high stats and knowing the boss's mechanics. In fact, I don't even think my Kokoro ever needed to even use the barrier, because the boss did no damage. I took like 200 damage from the boss. Absolutely nothing by just having high stats. The boss gets absolutely destroyed by high stats. Next up is Artist, and I know when the game released, a lot of people were like, oh man, Artist is like really, really difficult. But we have high stats now, and now that we have high stats, the boss barely scratches our team, and we don't take much damage at all. I maybe could have done this fight without a sustain if I got lucky, but at least this is the first boss where I say having a sustain actually makes sense, because if you're not level 120 and you don't have magic level 130 on all your characters, yes, you will actually take a little bit of damage here and there, so now our Kokoro actually has a reason to exist. So once again though, we have our Hazuki using our Breaker. Breaker gets a lot of turns, does a lot of breakage, and we kill the ads really easily. But we need a little bit more strategy than just that. The extra little bit of strategy is the fact that the boss by itself does basically nothing, because the boss does a lot more bonus damage when there are more ads alive. But if we kill the ads as fast as possible, which even with a Foster only team is not actually that difficult, because you can use Hazuki and Rika to keep pumping turns and MP and buffs into both your Breaker to break fast and then into your Attacker to attack hard, that kills ads really, really fast. And then once the ad is dead, you can then just take it slow against the boss. I'm a bit greedy. I actually use a lot of resources against the boss as well, but theoretically what you can do is you can just not use specials, you can not use too many skills, just a little bit of normal attacks, don't use your special, and you just wait for the next ad to spawn. And then when the ad spawns, you immediately throw all your specials onto the ad, which then kills the ad immediately, and then you can keep going back to the boss. And because the boss itself does so little damage, the boss has trouble breaking our Kokoro shields. Like, our Kokoro shields alone are withstanding most of the boss's hits, so the boss can't really do that much. Even with a damage buff, the boss can just barely break our Kokoro shields by like 50 damage or something, so basically nothing. So if this fight just continues like that, you can play this fight for a bit longer than usual. You don't have to kill this fight very quickly. You can just take your time, take it slow, make sure you kill the ads as soon as they pop up, and just whittle the boss down until the boss breaks. And then when the boss breaks, you can unleash everything you have. And even a Kush, who yes, doesn't do that much damage, she gains a lot of stacks from killing so many enemies that all get broken, of course. So she does actually end up doing a lot of damage at the end when the boss is broken, and the boss dies very quickly once the boss breaks. Chairperson doesn't really do anything on the other hand. Chairperson is really annoying because Chairperson keeps stunning your entire team, which is really annoying, and then debuffing your team and blah, and doing all kinds of stuff that's just very, very annoying. That said, this Chairperson does barely any damage, so your Kokoro shields alone are gonna last for like 2 turns, and the boss can't even break him. So it's actually a very, very simple boss because of that. Then we have Sandbox. So Sandbox Witch is interesting because the very start is probably the most difficult part, because the boss does more damage when it has more ads, and the boss fight starts with 2 ads. But once again, we have our Hazuki who gives the Breaker many turns, and by having the Hazuki give the Karen a bunch of turns, we can actually have Karen break first one of the ads and then the other ad really, really fast. And then as soon as both ads are broken, our Kush gains a lot of stacks for her damage, which means that as soon as the ads are broken, our Kush can then receive bonus turns from Hazuki, and Kush just instantly kills all the ads immediately as soon as they're broken. Like, it is actually quite nice how well everything fits together at the start of this fight to very quickly break and then very quickly kill the ads immediately within just a single turn, like a snap, and they're both gone. Very, very easy with this kind of setup. The reason we bring an Ayame and not a buffer is the fact that the boss gives itself a really big buff with shields, with maybe an attack buff or something like that, but Ayame's special gets rid of buffs. So as soon as the ads are dead, our Ayame just uses her special, and then the boss has no more buffs. And at that point the fight is over, because the boss, without buffs and without ads, does nothing. Can't do anything and just dies. So that's the Sandbox Witch. And then we get to something a little bit more interesting, with which I mean not interesting at all, and that is the horse. So horse, you just apply an ailment and then it can't do anything, and then the horse just dies. The only downside is the fact that, once again, we don't have an attacker that makes sense here, because Kush is an AoE attacker and this is a single target fight, and it's only light and dark, which means we don't have any other characters to use. But since we need someone to do an ailment, because the gimmick of this fight is that the boss doesn't do anything if it has an ailment on it, I guess instead of an attacker I brought Hana to just apply an ailment and then explode the ailment for damage, which still took like 3 breaks or something, because like I said, we don't have an attacker. But even without having the ability to use an attacker here, the boss can't really do much, because like I said, the boss doesn't do any damage. Like, our HP still goes down because of poison, but that's about it. Like, yeah, this boss is also kind of trivial. But here comes a boss that is very much not trivial at all, and probably the first big hurdle. Like, so far, if you just have a bunch of stats and the correct strategy, it's gonna be fine. This is the first boss that's actually kind of difficult, even if you know what you're doing. And the main reason is RNG. I can tell you right now, the boss after this is much easier. And then the final boss is also RNG heavy. So we're now at the last 3 bosses already. But yeah, this is RNG heavy. The main problem is the following. The boss does an attack at the very beginning that randomly hits enemies, which is your team, randomly hits your team, which means that one character could get hit like 4 or 5 times in a row and instantly die. That can just happen. And also the boss will randomly apply burn. Fun fact, that's the exact same thing that the final boss of this also does. And it's also the main reason why the final boss of this is also really, really bad. But for this boss, yeah, the fact that you can get randomly hit many times on the same character, and the fact that you can randomly get burns applied to either everyone or no one, makes a really big difference in how this fight goes. Which means that yes, if you get really unlucky, you might just have to restart, and there's not much you can do about that. If you get unlucky, just restart, okay? Now, as far as the actual strategy within the fight itself goes, I've gone with double sustain, simply because the boss does a lot of damage on its turns, but otherwise doesn't do anything. It's just a lot of damage on its turns. So if we can just survive that damage by having both Kokoro shields plus a healer, then the rest of the team can just worry about killing the boss as slow as possible as they want. It doesn't really matter that much. They can take their time, okay? This is not a race against some sort of ramping mechanic or anything like that. There is one thing to keep in mind though, and I don't know if I'm going to show it off on screen right now. The boss's damage stacks reset every turn unless you hit the boss with an attack like a special during its own turn. Because if you hit the boss with a special during its own turn, then the boss's stacks don't reset, which is likely to kill you, so you have to reset if you do that accidentally or on purpose. But outside of that, you kind of have to just get lucky. Keep your Kokoro shields up, keep your Reira happy, and always keep in mind that yes, I mentioned how important your Hazuki is for making the boss break faster and for making your attacker attack harder. But did you know that your Hazuki can also give emergency turns to your healer, to make your healer heal more and also get special harder? And if your healer can get to special faster, specifically with Reira, Reira's special cleanses ailments. So if you use Hazuki to give more turns and therefore more MP to Reira, she can have her special up a lot more often and actually cleanse a lot of those burns. Which is the main reason why I think it's actually fine to have a Reira here instead of a Yuma, because a Yuma can't cleanse ailments with special. But if it's on a special, that means you can save it. Like, you can just get to special and then stop, and then you can just wait. And then as soon as the enemy does the burn, you can then immediately hit the special. Of course, after the boss's turn is over, otherwise the buff gets extended. And then, like, immediately cleanse it immediately. Because otherwise, let's say your Yuma takes a really long time to get her turn, and Hazuki also takes a long time to get her turn. That means multiple people might have to take a turn with burn on them, which is terrible. But with the on-demand special, you can immediately get rid of that. Very nice. But yeah, it's basically for Birdcage. Like I said, you might have to reset a bunch. Otherwise, make sure to not attack the boss too often during between the boss's turns. Because the more often you attack the boss, the higher the boss's damage stacks go. So take it slowly sometimes, okay? Now here comes the big one, Walpurgisnacht. So Walpurgisnacht is actually really easy, and the main reason for that is that the boss doesn't actually do that much damage. Because once again, we have high stats. We have a high level on our characters, we have high magic level, we have 5-star supports, we have high stats from our portraits, we have Crystalist with maybe some guard, right, with maybe some extra attack up on it, with maybe some extra HP on it, with maybe some extra defense on it, stuff like that. Our healer might have a Crystalist with extra healing on it, for example. Like, we're gonna have so many ways now of both mitigating damage and then healing it back up. With both a Hazuki and Rika also giving MP and bonus turns to the healer. Just surviving is actually really, really easy. Like, you can basically survive this fight forever with just a Reira and a team where multiple characters are not of the correct element. Like, we have 3-5 characters on the team, The boss is not weak to fire, we take bonus damage. But the boss still can't hurt us. The boss still has a lot of trouble actually dealing damage to us, which means that just having your healer heal every turn means you can fight this boss forever. You can go the full 100 rounds against this boss and not die, not even get close to dying. So it's not actually that difficult on that sense. Because whenever you do drop a little bit low, here comes Hazuki with bonus turns, here comes Rika with bonus MP, and you're right back up. It's really that simple. There is one problem though, and this is the problem that makes this fight go on for a really long time. And that's the fact that the boss has this alternating system where on half the boss's turns, it takes very, very low amounts of damage, but the other half of the turns it takes normal damage, which means that you always have to break the boss on turns where it takes a lot of damage. Now, you could have a counter running in your head where you count like, okay, now it does less damage, now it takes more damage, blah, blah. But the way I do it is when I get somewhat close to breaking, I just hit the boss and look at the damage I'm doing. And I look at, am I doing damage right now or not? And I see, oh, my buffer just hit the boss for 100 damage. That's not a lot. Okay, so right now the boss is not taking any damage. And then I know, okay, I need to wait one more turn, and then next turn I can break. Or if I hit the boss and see my buffer just did 2000 damage. Okay, now the boss is taking a lot of damage, but maybe I can't break the boss right now, so I need to wait an extra turn, and then another turn after that, and then I can break, right? So you always need to make sure when the boss is about to be broken that you just hit the boss and see how much damage you're doing, and then figure out, do I need to break this turn, or the next turn, or the turn after that, and then figure it out in such a way that you break the boss when the boss is actually able to take damage. Now, one thing to note is also the boss is weak to light and dark, which means once again we don't have an attacker. That makes sense here because Kusher doesn't do that much damage. Instead, I just took another buffer, because by having another buffer we also do a lot of damage even without an attacker, and I just did that instead. Not to mention that both of the buffers that I have, which is Rika and Rico, they both give more speed to the party, so we actually end up having a fuck ton of speed. Like, this team has a lot of speed on it because of both Rika and Rico both giving speed buffs to the party. So that's the main reason I took them. And if you're wondering, okay, who does the actual damage then? Do you think supporting is the only thing that Hazuki can do? She can also be a damage dealer. You can just have her do specials for really high damage, and then here comes the insane part. She can give herself MP by using her skill on herself, which gives her a lot of turns and a lot of MP, and then she can just use multiple specials in a row on the same turn. The only downside of that is that you're using up a lot of skill points, and all buffs that are on you, like Rika's buffs, like Rico's buffs, they run out very, very fast. But theoretically, you can do that. Like, that's a strategy you can do to do more damage against this boss. The boss sadly has more mechanics to slow you down, which is the fact that the boss gives itself a barrier sometimes, and it can also give itself a shield, like 10 stacks of shield. And if it has either a barrier or a shield on it, it takes drastically reduced break gauge depletion, which means you can't really move its break gauge while it has either a barrier or a shield on it. And it also heals itself while a shield or a barrier is up. That's the only thing that's stopping you from fighting this boss, for rather killing this boss quickly, because it means that the boss can heal itself and also slow down your breaking of the boss. That said, with the team I have, I still do more than enough damage to kill this boss way faster than it can heal itself. But do keep in mind that, yeah, this might be an issue, that you get stalled for so long that the boss heals for more than you do damage. Which is why you might want to, you really want to make sure that you break the boss on turns where it's actually taking damage, and then make sure that you can use your Rico buffs, your Rika buffs, everyone buff Hazuki, and then Hazuki get as many specials out as possible. You really want to try and go for all of that to get as much damage out of it as possible. I make some mistakes in this fight. I make a lot of mistakes in this fight, but I still kill this boss in about 20 or so turns, which is a long time, but the boss can't even touch me. Like, I'm at no point in this fight am I ever in danger of dying, not even a little. The fight just goes on for a long time and just keeps going and going and going. But you will win eventually. Especially if, of course, you have even higher stats than I have right now, right? Because the more stats you gain, the more attack you have, and the more attack you have, the easier it is to deal damage to the boss. So this boss only is going to become easier. So now that we've gone through that, here's the only boss that I would say is like actually really difficult, even with everything that I've mentioned so far. But as far as I know, fighting Needle Witch Nightmare with Forster only is not currently a mission. I think the current missions end at Walpurgisnacht, I think. But of course in the future there's going to be a mission for this one, so you might as well already know how to do this one. So I went with the following. I went with double sustain, with both Yuma to be able to cleanse quickly. I said earlier stuff that I like Reda for cleansing more. The problem is that with this boss, Needle Witch Nightmare applies ailments on the very first turn, and Reda can't get special quite that fast. So instead I went with Yuma, because Yuma can of course immediately start cleansing. But this fight is very RNG dependent. Even with everything that I mentioned, even with this team, RNG can just screw you over because the boss does random hits and you could just randomly hit the same target like 10 times in a row and you die. Nothing you can do about that. You can have the same target get burned over and over and over. You can have your entire team get burned all at once and then again next turn. And there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to hit the reset button. And that's sad, but there's nothing you can do about it. You just say reset, go next, whatever, it happened. You just have to accept that. I'm sorry. As far as damage and everything else goes, the only good breaker that we have is Ashley, which is an AoE breaker, which is sad because it's not an AoE fight. But once again, it's not that bad to use Ashley here, but you can also just say, well, since Ashley is a single target, is an AoE breaker and this boss is a single target, and since everything comes down to RNG anyway, why not just use an extra buffer? Because if we use an extra buffer, you can also use a debuffer if you want, but using an extra buffer, we can at least do more damage and make it a lot easier to kill the boss in a single break, right? Because if we have to kill the boss in 2 breaks, then we might as well just take a buffer and kill the boss in a single break, because that might still be faster overall than having to play for 2 breaks, right? At least with the team setup that I had with my Ashley, I didn't do enough damage to kill the boss in a single break. So I said, if I can't do it in a single break with Ashley, I'll get a buffer and then I'll do it in a single break, but of course it takes longer to get that break. But yeah, general strategy is the same as always, where your Hazuki gives as many turns as possible to other characters, usually in this case the healer, or if the defender needs to reapply shield before the boss turns to make sure that I survive. Like, I'm basically just trying to survive as long as possible, and then once the break happens, I'm stacking everything that I can on Masada to immediately one-shot the boss. Like, I don't want to give the boss any amount of breathing room. As soon as the boss gets broken, it has to die immediately. There's no ifs and buts around it. That said, I think I still mess up. I still mess up and have a bad break because I broke the boss at a really inopportune time during my kill, and I actually failed, and I had to do a second break, which means that my strategy didn't even work. So I had to go to a second break, sadly. But I managed to still do that, which I think I got really lucky. Like I said, this is all RNG. I just got lucky that I was able to go to a second break without a breaker even on the team. So it was a really long fight, but it worked. But yeah, for the most part, like I said, just keep resetting. There's not much you can do about this. But because this is not a mission just yet, it's not that big of a deal. And once this becomes a mission, maybe you're already going to be level 120, maybe you're going to have even higher magic level, and then this boss fight is only going to become easier. And you can get more Crystallis. Most of my characters only have 1 Crystallis. You can give them 2 Crystallis, 3 Crystallis. You can have more guards on your characters, right? More focus guards on your characters, more HP substats. If you give every character like 3 Crystallis with just 400 HP substats, like 1,200 more HP on everyone, that's already like an entire boss attack that you can now suddenly survive longer that you didn't survive before. So you can do a lot with just having higher stats. So yeah, TLDR, just get high stats, dude. That's about it. Just get high stats and then play the boss mechanics, and that's kind of simple. And if you don't have enough high enough stats yet, you can just wait until you have higher stats with more magic level, with higher character level, etc. That's basically that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, shout out to my members, Chai Bean, Ipvan Winkel, and Simpletor. Thank you very much.